Spotlight.
This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on key issues in Lex Fridman's podcast with the Prime Minister. The participants are Prafulla Ketkar, senior journalist, and Neelabh Srivastava, journalist.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to Lex Fridman, a very popular podcaster. He's a US-based AI scientist, computer scientist. And this podcast that was relayed yesterday was almost 3 hours long. And with this particular segment of our edition, there were so many things that the PM spoke about, from his own personal life to what is happening in the India's immediate neighborhood, the global situation, what is happening in war and peace, the kind of political decisions and the policy decisions that the Modi government is taking, what is happening with the different kind of philosophies that the Prime Minister professes and also tries to bring in his mode of governance. Prafulji, there are so many aspects when we see to it, but if we start from the root, we can only take few points out of what PM has spoken about. But if we speak about the root from where Prime Minister started his journey, so he also spoke about his childhood that was spent in extreme poverty. So what was that you found special where PM mentioned about what has happened in his life and how he went about it?
What I found fascinating about this is, PM has spoken about his vision at length through various speeches, interviews, during election rallies. But speaking in a podcast mode for more than 3 hours is a different kind of experience, because there are, chances where you tend to speak out certain things which may be interpreted otherwise. Generally, podcast is a very casual kind of conversation, one-to-one conversation. But the way Prime Minister handled it, from his personal life to as a statesman, it's fascinating, especially about his personal life that you asked about. The way he brought in his life as a school student in Vadnagar and the history of Vadnagar, Yuan Sang, and the way his curiosity as a student help in exploring the Buddhist root of Vadnagar. That is very, very interesting aspect, because very few people are able to do that kind of. And he didn't just stop there. As a chief minister of Gujarat, and later on, he ensured that Vadnagar is turned into, he developed their museum of various artifacts, where the 2,500-old continuous tradition of a city. And then he connected Vadnagar to Varanasi. So I think what Prime Minister did through this podcast is, as a person coming from a very humble background of poverty, and the way he said that for me, poverty was just a given thing, but I never failed because we never cribbed about it. At the same time, we never had nothing to compare. So whatever I have experienced, it in fact contributed in personality to serve the people. So he understands poverty, and without making it an issue, he is now trying to deliver to eradicate poverty. So I think that the way he narrated that entire story is very fascinating.
Right, he also spoke about embracing the life instead of fretting over death.
Oh yes.
Ki mrityu to aani hai. So these different aspects of his life, and he also spoke about, when we see in the larger context of the globe, so a large part of the world is in conflict. He spoke about peace. He spoke about the dominating stature that India has and the cultural values. It is the land of Buddha and Gandhi. And he also spoke about how, I would like to ask you a question about how he spoke about the Russia and the Ukraine war and the larger global perspectives. First, let us listen to what PM said.
सांस्कृतिक रूप से, ऐतिहासिक रूप से हमारा बैकग्राउंड इतना मजबूत है कि जब भी हम शांति के लिए बात करते हैं तो विश्व हमें सुनता है, क्योंकि बौद्ध की भूमि है, ये महात्मा गांधी की भूमि है, तो विश्व में सुनता है। और हम संघर्ष के पक्ष के है ही नहीं, न हम प्रकृति से संघर्ष चाहते हैं, न हम राष्ट्रों के बीच में संघर्ष चाहते हैं। हम समन्वय चाहने वाले लोग हैं, और उसमें अगर कोई भूमिका हम अदा कर सकते हैं तो हमने निरंतर अदा करने का प्रयत्न किया है।
So we'll just listen to what PM spoke about India's stature across the globe. When we come across the Russia-Ukraine war, Prime Minister Modi said that both sides should join the negotiation table, and all of us have known that he always has said that this is not the time of war. How would you analyze this particular statement of the Prime Minister?
What he has done actually is he has articulated India's civilizational vision for the world. When he said that post-COVID, we were expecting a new world order, like it happened after the Second World War. Unfortunately, the world didn't learn its lessons. But what he articulated, that his vision of one world, one grid, one world, one health, one world, one family, one future. So that idea of oneness, what is diversity is not necessarily differences. It should not turn into conflicts. There will be competition. There will be difference of opinion. There will be diversities, and we should celebrate those diversities. That is the fundamental philosophy of Bharat. Good. And he has articulated the vision for world order in purely Indian paradigm. And in that sense, he brought in Buddha and Gandhi, and where he confidently said that I can simultaneously sit with President Putin and say this is not a time for war, and at the same time, across the table I can talk to Zelensky and tell that even if entire world is standing with you, it is no use if you do not find some reconciliatory position. And why India's stand has become, and I stand for peace, I'm not a neutral. That was a catchword. We stand for peace. India has a position. We are not a neutral in that sense. And there I think PM articulated the foreign policy vision and world order with a purely Indian paradigm. Till now we were playing mainly with the Western paradigm of international politics. Now what we are seeing under Prime Minister Modi is we are trying to give our own paradigm to the world.
I bring you from the global perspective to the immediate neighborhood. We obviously are the situation that we have with China, both trade as well as security, also the situation with Pakistan. I'll take you to Pakistan's question, what Prime Minister spoke about the Pakistan situation, and he regretted that India has been making an attempt to have good relations with Pakistan, but it has always been met with hostility and betrayal. This is what his exact words were. So what is your analysis? What was PM saying about? Because he also mentioned that when he took oath, he always invited the Prime Minister, Mr. Nawaz Sharif of that time. So what is his analysis? What was he trying to say in the podcast?
When Prime Minister Modi took over, there were two questions that were primarily asked. One is what he will do about his foreign policy, and two, whether he will be more hawkish towards Pakistan. And everybody was expecting a very hardline kind of approach. And that's why Prime Minister inviting all SAARC neighbors, including Pakistan, for his swearing-in ceremony was a game changer in that sense. Then he suddenly visiting Lahore for Nawaz Sharif's daughter's wedding. That was also a surprise move. But what we have seen after that, the terror attack continued. Then he suddenly shifted the gear and he almost made Pakistan as irrelevant in India's foreign policy. We became so big that Pakistan almost do not feature now in our immediate foreign policy consideration. So he was hoping, he made two broad statements. One, Pakistan is a problem not only for India but for the entire world because it has become a center of state-sponsored terrorism. And two, because of that, Pakistan's economy and overall state of affairs, what we are seeing even in Balochistan now or occupied region of Jammu Kashmir now, that people are also fed up with the state of affairs in Pakistan. So he just left it with a hope that some sense will prevail in the establishment of Pakistan. But what was more interesting is the way he gave the entire background of partition. That after partition, everybody was hoping that a separate Muslim state and whoever wanted to go there had given a state and they would start a new life there as an independent state. But unfortunately, they continued with, and he said this is not at all ideology. Right. Killing cannot be ideology. This is purely state-sponsored terrorism, and indirectly he said this is suicidal, nothing else.
So the oldest democracy, which is the US, we will also speak about those relations. China also, Prime Minister spoke about. Now we have an active standoff, military standoff that we had with China since 2020, and now we're trying to building up. Situation is getting better now. So with regard to China, Mr. Ketkar, Prime Minister said that there should be a mutually beneficial and essential relationship, good for global peace, good for us. Let us be competitors, but with a lot of friendship in between. So is this a message largely for China? Is this a message for the world? I come to you with regard to what Prime Minister spoke about US, but China first.
I think first time any Prime Minister of India has articulated our policy towards China this way, that China-India relation or Indo-China relationship has been civilizational. We have been great civilizations who have interacted with each other in terms of trade, in terms of religion, in terms of philosophies, in terms of medicine, and we never had a history of a conflictual relationship until Cold War. Only during the Cold War, we started a kind of strains in our relationship. So, revisiting China from a civilizational prism rather than the colonial or Cold War prism is a new approach. And that's why he said that Buddhism has been at one point a very strong connect. What we are seeing in terms of global technological or tariff or WTO related things, there are many forums where India and China cooperated with each other. They have voted on the same side. So that clearly shows that if world peace has to be there, India and this century has to be the Asian century, then India and China has to have some mutual. There will be competition for spaces, there will be competition for products. But when it comes to managing relations, managing world affairs, and if it has to be rule-based, then India and China as biggest populace of the world will have to have some common ground. And the message was very, very clear to the Chinese Communist Party as well as to the world that we are ready to accommodate all kinds of positions. We will manage our boundary related issues, but when it comes to the global affairs, we have to cooperate.
We have now time for last two topics to be discussed, and I will first ask you very briefly about what he spoke about President Trump. We all know that he has just got back to his second presidency, and PM said that looks to be more prepared in the second term. I'm also asking you in this context because April 2nd is when we are expecting the US to declare the tariffs vis-a-vis in context with India.
The US is better prepared. I think India is also better prepared to deal with the Trump regime. We were expecting the kind of policies that may take place. So when it comes to negotiating, where will Elon Musk feature? He mentioned about Elon Musk or Tulsi Gabbard or Vivek Ramaswamy, and he spoke about his team also. So I think Indian establishment was also well prepared to deal with the Trump regime. And that's why when President Trump and Prime Minister Modi had a joint press conference, when tariff-related question came, both of them were very diplomatically handled it. So everybody was expecting that President Trump might declare some kind of tariff on India also, but that didn't happen, and that was because of the term that he's more a tough negotiator than me. Trump, that also came in the discussion. But the way he remarked about the Houston rally, the Howdy Modi rally, and the way Trump handled that Modi and Trump having a round from within the Indian diaspora crowd, completely putting entire American security system at toss. They were completely, and we could feel that there. But what Prime Minister mentioned in his podcast, it actually gave a perspective why this was important when it comes to Modi-Trump chemistry.
Moving towards where Prime Minister Modi started his political career. He was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, the 2002 Gujarat riots. This was specifically asked during the podcast, and the Prime Minister said this was a false narrative. He has spoken about Gujarat riots in the past also in interviews and in discussions. What you found was new this time, what he spoke about the Gujarat riots?
I think he was more speaking to the global audience. That has been the question that is always asked, and there are many people who have thrived on that narrative, and he completely thrashed them. Two ways. One, because Fridman himself talked about the way judiciary has dealt with it. But secondly, more importantly, the way Prime Minister Modi gave the context of Godhra train burning. One, Kandahar hijack, parliament attack on Jammu Kashmir Assembly, 9/11. On this background, Godhra train was burnt and 57 car sevaks were burned, and that led to the outburst. Secondly, he mentioned that there used to be a time where Baroda, Ahmedabad and Bharuch, these three cities used to see frequent curfews and Hindu-Muslim tensions. But what we are seeing from 2002 onwards, that clearly shows the determination. And people from both the sides, people who were involved in burning the train and who were involved in rioting after that, both were, faced the legal actions. I think he conveyed his position very clearly, and I think now internationally at least this issue would be put to rest, because there have been much bigger riots in India. 1969 Ahmedabad riots he mentioned, but even 1990s I remember in Baroda and in Bharuch we have seen many Hindu-Muslim tensions. We are not seeing those kind of situations in Gujarat. That is a changed situation now.
There were many other topics that the Prime Minister spoke about, the artificial intelligence, which is so much in news now, how this will never be able to matching the human imagination, life lessons that he has learned from the RSS, many more such points that he discussed during the podcast. Thank you for speaking to us, Mr. Ketkar.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on key issues in Lex Fridman's podcast with the Prime Minister. The participants were Prafulla Ketkar, senior journalist, and Neelabh Srivastava, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official.
Spotlight.